Welcome to the KidMin podcast with Dr. Val and Dr. Virginia, where we talk about everything KidMin
and pull back the curtain on some of the surprises and challenges in children's ministry that nobody prepares you for.
I'm Dr. Val, and together we have over 45 years of experience in children's ministry.
I'm Dr. Virginia. Valerie and I met over 10 years ago in our doctoral program at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. We are excited to share with you all the great stuff that we have picked up over the years. We want to minister to you, the children's minister.
Welcome, friends. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I will tell you what, Dr. Virginia, I am super excited to finally be recording this episode on burnout. How about you?
Yes. Same. This is not our first attempt at recording this. We've had some technical difficulties, but I will say this. Yes. But the very first time we tried to record this, as soon as we started, I immediately started feeling conviction. Our episode is on burnout. Right. And I just, like, the second we got going, it was like the Lord was like, hey, so you're about to talk about all these techniques and all these ideas. Are you doing them? And I was like, oh, Jesus. So, because and we'll talk more about this, one of my favorite things is getting out and going for walks. And that's also the very first thing to go whenever I'm most stressed and most busy and have the most going on. And so the Lord really convicted me, like, hey, if you're gonna talk about these things, if you're gonna try to teach these things, you got to be practicing them. So,
and that's the hard part.
Yeah,
it's really easy to know what we need to do.
Yes,
it's actually going through with it. This is the difficult part.
Yes. But that very day, since we ended up not recording that, I took that extra little slice of time and went to my favorite place to go walk, and went and walked, out on a nature trail and out in nature. And so even though I felt a lot of conviction about that, it all worked out in the end. And so it was just a good reminder for me to do the things that I know that I need to do to help me in my personal well-being and my spiritual well-being and emotional and mental. So yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Well, and that's the thing. I have to admit, for me, the things that we're going to be talking about today have been the most difficult of my ministry, I believe, because I do tend to try to do everything. I don't tend to really always think about the repercussions of the things that I have done over the years and how it does start to build up and how it does start to wear on you after a while. And so there are things that are really easy for us as ministry leaders to put off because we think that there are other things that are more urgent. But they are so vitally important for us to be able to continue our ministry. And we've talked about this before where, on the airplane, they tell you to put the mask on yourself before you put it on the children or help other people, because if you are not taking care of yourself, you can't help other people. And it's that same sort of idea with all of the things that we're going to be talking about today. There are things that are vitally important that you do to take care of yourself so that you can continue to lead in your ministry and to reach out and to help others. And so I'm really excited about the topics because truly I have done a ton of research on this because I have read every book, every article, because again, it's something that I truly struggle with. And so I've worked really hard to try to figure out how to implement these things into my life and into my ministry over the years. So I'm very excited. So let's just jump in. Let's jump in and talk about what are some of the things that we can do as children's ministers to help prevent burnout, because it's a very real thing. I wish that I had been that really great doctoral student and done my research so that I had numbers. But honestly, I don't even think we need numbers for this one to know that it's true. Ministry burnout is an issue all the way across the board in any place that you serve. But I really do believe that it is very high in children's ministry because of the nature of our ministry and the things that we have to do. And so let's just jump right in. What are some things that you think about when you think about how we can help protect ourselves from burnout, how to prevent burnout in our own life and our own ministry?
Yeah, so let's go ahead and jump in with some personal disciplines, both spiritual disciplines and just physical habits and things that we can do to address burnout. Starting with spiritual disciplines. Things like, having our daily quiet time, as we used to call it back in the early 2000s. I don't know if people still call it that anymore. But spending time in
personal
scripture.
time.
Yes, personal time in scripture and in prayer. And this is different than preparing to teach, preparing a lesson.
Definitely.
That is one of the things that they definitely emphasize in seminary. They say, look, like preparing to teach, yes, it is time in the word, but it's not that personal time in the word for your own spiritual benefit and edification. But you need to be pouring that into yourself before you are pouring that out to others.
Right. Because when you are preparing to teach, when you're preparing a lesson, your focus, your prayer, everything about that lesson you're preparing is for others. You're looking at, not that you can't glean a lot of wonderful things from your preparation time. You can.
Right.
But your focus is to pour into others. It's not looking at your own personal spiritual life and how God is speaking to you. You're looking for how you can speak to others. And so it is really important that we make sure that we have that time that we can spend with God on our own. And I've been just as guilty of that as everyone else, where you just spend so much time pouring into preparing that you think, oh, I've been in the scripture all day, I'm good. But that's really not. It's really not the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
No. And I think that's why it's so important for you to find a specific time that you can worship.
Yes.
A time for you to worship and a time for you to learn from someone else teaching the word of God.
Right.
And that is probably the thing that is the most difficult for children's ministers to be able to do, because we are so very connected to being in our ministry area during Bible study, during Sunday school, during worship service, during all of these times. And a lot of ministers don't have the option, because leadership wants them to be in in their area during the service every single time. And I understand that completely. I've been blessed that most of the pastors that I've worked for have been very adamant about me making sure that I have time in the worship service, that I have time in a small group, that I have the ability to be able to do that at some point during the week. But now there have been times where I've been with leadership that preferred me to be in the children and preschool area during every single serving time. And so when that happens, I've had to be a little more creative to find ways to allow myself to be in worship, because I can remember the first time I had not done that for a very long time. I had been serving. I had not been in worship for a very long time, and I attended a conference. And during the worship portion of the conference, I literally just cried through the entire thing, because I was so emotional, because I realized, wow, I have not worshiped with other believers in so long that it just, I felt it just in every fiber of my being, and it just was overwhelming. And so it was at that point that I decided I had to find some place where I could worship and where I could learn and where I could be a part of that. And so I had worked it out. We lived in a large city at that time, and there was actually a church that had services on Friday evening. And so I worked it out with my pastor, where he knew that on Friday evenings I was going to attend this worship service, and so that was my time to be able to go worship and be with other believers and to learn. And I know that that's not always possible, but the great thing about today is that we have so many churches that post their services online. So you can, even in your own home, still participate in worship and have someone that you're learning from, either whether it's your own church where you can watch your own church service, but you have to block out a Sabbath.
Yes.
If your Sabbath can't be Sunday because you're working the whole time in your ministry, then you need to have another day that's your Sabbath. That is your time to worship, your time to learn, your time to rest. And so it's just vitally important that you protect that ability to have a Sabbath sometime during the week.
Right. And one of the ways I kind of think about it and discuss it with, children's ministry leaders is, if any other church member always missed the worship service, we would say to them, hey, come back. We miss you. We want to see you. It's important to be a part of this fellowship. It's important to be in this community and to feel like you're in that community as well. And so, God created us to be a part of communities and to be a part of fellowship with other believers. He didn't create us, just like what you're saying, to do this on our own. And so that whenever we finally are with other believers, we just break
Right.
down weeping because it's been
Right.
so long, because I've
It's
been in
been
that
so
position
long.
too.
Right.
And so, I just think, that wouldn't fly for anyone else.
Right.
And so really, we need to, just like what you said, be very intentional about
Right.
getting ourselves in fellowship with other believers, just like we would expect of any other Christian, for sure.
I think the biggest mistake that I have probably made in my home ministry and through most of my time in serving is that I have forgotten that my ministry is not the same as my relationship with God.
Mm.
I am foremost a child of God.
Amen.
My ministry cannot be the entirety of my
Mm.
relationship with God.
Amen.
Before I say I am a children's minister, I have to be able to
Right.
say I am a believer in Christ. I
Amen.
am a follower of Christ. And so my relationship with God has to come first over my ministry, just like we would tell anyone else. If you were an attorney or a doctor or,
Right.
any other church member, like you said,
Yes.
that would come to us and say something about their job being the most important thing in their life, we would come back and say, oh, but no, your relationship with God is the most important
Yes.
thing in your life, because it is. And
Mhm.
so for us as people who serve in ministry, we tend to kind of gray the two together. And when that happens, it can affect you in significant ways, because ministry is not always easy, and it's not
Right.
always kind, and it's not always edifying. There are
Mhm.
moments that you have to kind of struggle through. And so you have to
Mhm.
have that relationship with God, that foundation,
Yes.
to be able to serve in ministry and be able to keep
Right.
your focus on what the main thing is. And so
Yes. Amen.
we have to be able to find that way to protect our spiritual life
Mhm.
while we are serving. And I think that that's one of the greatest causes of burnout.
Yes.
I really think it's probably one of the greatest causes of when you hear people say after serving in ministry, they are no longer believers.
Mm.
Like, so many times we hear of
They
people
just walk
saying,
away from the church
I'm walking
completely.
away from,
Mhm.
from everything that has to do with God because of ministry. And I think it's because of that. I think ministry becomes the
Mhm.
focal point of that person's spiritual life. And so when something happens in ministry, it affects
Right.
their spiritual life negatively.
Mhm.
And so I think it's just vitally important that we are able to separate those two things in our personal lives, where we have our relationship with God and we serve in ministry, and find a way to be able to bring the two together, but then be very separate things at the same
Right.
time, if that makes
Right.
sense. Hopefully
Yes.
that is
Yes.
clear.
It does. It does. That makes a lot of sense, and that's a very good distinction. You're right, between, being a child of God all the time, every day, regardless of our circumstances,
Right.
and yes, being a vocational minister,
Mhm.
and not letting that vocational ministry take over and
Right.
squash out everything else, as it can
Right.
very easily do. Because
It can.
a very seasoned, long tenured, 35 years plus, music minister said to me once, he said, the church will take as much as you will give it.
Right.
You can't expect the church to set boundaries around your time, around your family, around your energy. You have
Right.
to set those boundaries, because, the
It's
church and the
true.
ministry and the needs will just keep coming and coming and coming and coming. And so you have
Yes.
to set those boundaries, which is another one of our topics. But first, let's
Actually,
get to.
I
Oh, go ahead.
think that goes well
Uh-huh.
into the talking about boundaries and how we do need to set boundaries. And I'm not great at boundaries. I don't know about
Yeah.
you, Dr. Virginia, but I am
Mhm.
really terrible at boundaries, because I tend to, in my brain, the way that it works, I tend to think that I'm being selfish if I set boundaries, and
Mm,
I'm really
but
not.
that's not
Boundaries help
right.
you and they help the people you are working with. And so
Right.
what are some of the boundaries that you are thinking of when?
Definitely, just like I said, around your time, around your family, not one is like not feeling like you have to constantly be available anytime anyone in the church wants to see you, wants to meet with you. Like, it's okay to carve out a few certain times a week to be like, someone's like, oh, I want to meet with you and I want to talk with you about this. And you say, okay, so I, have some time on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Mondays at this time, which one of those days and times would be good for you?
Right.
That way, if they're like, yeah, I'd really like to meet with you for a nice coffee chat at 5 a.m. It's okay to set boundaries around your time. It's okay to set boundaries around your time with your family. There'll always be emergencies. There will always be, surprise church members in the hospital, and you have to deal with that. And we get that. But for the most part, carving out that time, setting aside those specific times and putting it on your calendar, writing it down, entering it in that way. Okay, Friday night's family night. This is an event scheduled on my calendar. I have, again, these 3 blocks of time that I'm available to meet with people. Let's fit it in one of these 3 days and times. And so just being intentional, deliberate, and setting some boundaries around your time and around your schedule for starters.
And you really have to, because I had a lady in our ministry one time that sent me an email. Like, for example, she did this often, but for example, this one particular day, she sent me an email. Mm-hmm. And then 5 minutes later, she sent me a text to ask if I received the email. And then 5 minutes later, she called my ministry assistant to find out if I had received the email and the text.
Oh, goodness.
And
right.
It ended up, and then that became a very regular occurrence. It wasn't an emergency. It was literally just some information about an event that we had, like 6 months in the future. So it wasn't even like an immediate
pressing. Yeah.
Right. And so I really ended up having to kind of schedule a meeting with her to say, look, I appreciate all you do in the ministry, and I appreciate your excitement about things, but I just want to let you know that I'm not always going to immediately be able to answer just everything that comes across my desk, because there's also others that are doing the same. And I am also not the type of person, like, for example, if I'm talking with you and my phone rings, unless I know I'm waiting for like an emergency kind of call, I don't answer it. Mm-hmm. And that can really annoy some people, because they really feel like that they should be answered every minute. And I understand that, but that is their misconception, and we can't let that affect the way that we are handling our day, because then it becomes constantly just dealing with these interruptions that could wait, because they're not somebody is in the hospital in ICU. This is, just, I need to know about an event in 6 months. We want to respond timely. I'm a big person, and I do try to get my inbox done every day, because I do want to respond in a timely manner.
Right.
But I had to make sure that I let people know, if you text me, it might be a while before I answer, because I could be in a meeting, or I might be doing something else. I was really big on making sure I put the things that you can set to send those out of office messages, so that if it was a time that I was with my family, that it sent that immediate message back, thank you for your contact. I'm out of the office. I'll get back in touch with you as soon as possible, kind of thing, just so that people would know. But it's like you said, it's making sure that you can, making sure that you set these very important boundaries on what you're comfortable with and what you feel like you can handle in your day with your schedule and the way things work for you. I heard somebody say, and I wish I could remember who it was, because I hate not giving credit, but it was somebody on Instagram who made the statement that I think that you need to learn that I'm sorry, no is a complete sentence. After you say no, you don't have to necessarily explain yourself or say why or qualify it in any way. Once you set your boundaries, these are the things that I am willing to do. These are the things that these are my no's. Then, be confident in that.
Absolutely. And just like what you're saying, just because we live in such an instantaneous society, such an interconnected society, you're right. It doesn't mean that you owe people that constant access to you, because that's exhausting.
It is exhausting.
That's exhausting. And you can't, you can't focus on, deep work and have deep focus if your phone's dinging, every
Right.
5 seconds, and you're constantly checking emails and texts. And so it is. So it's definitely okay to set aside those times. Like, okay, I'm going to check my email. I'm going to check my, digital stuff at this time, from this time to this time. And just like you said, I'm
Yes.
going to respond in a timely manner. I'm going to respond, within 24 hours or whatever you think is appropriate. But definitely setting those boundaries around all of that.
Yes.
So,
And understanding that if that has not been your norm and
mm,
you're realizing that it needs to become what you do, you're going to receive pushback from it.
right.
Because people have
Right.
come to expect the
The
immediate. They've come to
constant
expect you to
access.
drop everything so it's going to be there's going to be a learning curve
Mhm,
there.
mhm,
And you
mhm.
just need to be prepared for that and still
Right.
understand that even if someone else gets upset at your
Mhm,
boundaries, that is their issue, not
mhm,
yours. You
mhm,
have set your boundaries. You've set what you know you can handle, what you can do, and then you move forward from there. And it's not an easy thing. It's not something I've ever done very well, but it's something that's really, really important for us
yeah,
to be able to do. Now,
yeah.
we talked a little bit about walking in nature, that type of thing.
Yes.
Have you been pretty good at being able to remember to take care of your physical body
Yeah.
well through ministry, or is that something that you struggle with? Because I've struggled with it a great deal.
No, I hear that, because there are lots of basic physical habits that we need to put in
Yeah.
place, just for our own well-being. Things like getting enough sleep,
Right.
eating good nutrition, just taking care of our physical bodies, because it's easy to feel like we need to stay up late to do that one more little thing, or I'm just gonna grab something quick for lunch today, or I'm just gonna skip lunch, or I'm just gonna eat some goldfish from the snack cupboard, and then that'll be
Yeah.
fine. But really, we have to take care of our physical needs, of our bodies, in order to be able to serve in the ways that God wants us to.
Yes.
Sleep, food, all those things included.
They're just it's vital. And I
Mhm.
promise you, when I was young, I thought, "Oh, it doesn't matter. I can handle this." Like I could do, I could eat whenever, I could not eat. I could eat if I needed to, like just something quick. I could do whatever. I could lift, I could carry, I could move things. I would carry the heavy tables to do all the setup by myself. Because I could, and I thought, okay, I can do this. It's fine. And I
Yeah.
can't count the number of times I'd be carrying a heavy table down a hallway past the deacons as they stood there chatting, and they'd say, "Hello, Valerie." And I'd be like, "Hi." And I'd just keep carrying the table. Never in my head did I ever think to
Oh.
stop and say, "Hey guys, could you all help me carry this table and set it up?" Because I just never would have done that, because I felt like I had to be responsible. It's my ministry. I have to do all the
Mhm,
setup. I have to do all the tear down. And over time, it really
mhm.
began to take a toll. It wasn't something that I
Yeah.
noticed until many years into it, that I
Mhm,
really did not do my back a favor by taking on
mhm,
all of those responsibilities and not
mhm.
asking for help. That, not exercising, not staying, strong, not eating well, that all of that begins to catch up to us as we
Yes,
get older.
yes, yes.
And so now looking back, I'm like, oh, I wish that I had been more mindful of all of those things as I was growing in ministry, and as I was doing
Mhm.
so I didn't take on so much on myself, because it has been more detrimental over the years than I think I realized at the time. So one of the things I always say to people is, yes, please think through like how you do things and how you
Yes,
treat your body and how you take time,
yes.
because even though it might not feel immediate, it's important
It's
in the long
cumulative.
run.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yes,
it
yes.
is. It definitely is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And another thing is, you kind of mentioned this and I mentioned it. Spending time out in nature.
Yes.
I was telling Valerie earlier, I heard two separate podcasts who both talked about spending 2 hours in nature a week. And they were saying that 2 hours in nature is going to be the new 10,000 steps.
Yeah.
So, we all kind of like set that as our benchmark. Like, okay, 10,000 steps a day. I can do that. That's really going to help my
You
health.
can do that at the church easy,
And
usually
yes,
running around in
yes,
circles.
yes, 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 you're not wrong. Absolutely. And not that 10,000 steps is bad,
Oh,
but
no.
that, scientists and researchers are discovering just how essential it is for our mental, emotional, and physical health to be spending time outside in nature. And whenever we were talking
Oh.
about this too, we're like, oh, it's almost like God designed us to live like in a perfect, beautiful garden in perfect harmony with him and nature and everything. It's almost like that's designed into how we operate. Imagine that.
Well, and it was so funny because I just actually read an article this morning that was talking about the same thing. It was a study talking about exercising in a gym or inside and compared to exercising outside. And it talked about the mental and the physical, just the how much better outside was for the participants in that particular study to be outside as opposed to even if they were doing the same activities inside.
Right.
And
Right.
so it really does, it does make a big difference. And
It
so
does.
again, it's taking just that few minutes just to step
Mhm.
outside and take a deep breath and get your feet in the grass and just take that
Yes.
moment to just sort of have that moment for yourself to be able to just have some time to relax for even if it's just a few minutes in the middle of the day. It's
Right.
incredibly important.
It is. It is.
Mhm.
It is. We're very fortunate to have like a nice little nature trail where there's like some little streams and some babbling brooks, and it's just being out there in the midst of the trees and hearing that running water. It's just, I'm like, man, this is really refreshing. Like, this is really nice. So I'm very grateful for that.
One of the things that I did too, now this is not talking about outside, but just talking about taking that minute was that I had found a place in the church that I could go when I just needed a moment.
Mm.
It was just it was sort of an out of the way place that no one kind of ever came along. It was just I would stay there in the dark. I wouldn't even turn on any lights because I didn't want anybody to know I was there. But it just was just a place where I could go for just 5 minutes.
Just go
When
close yourself in the
everything was
VBS
overwhelming.
closet or whatever.
Yes, it's
Yes.
finding that spot wherever that spot might be, and just taking that those few moments just to pray for a minute, just to take those deep breaths. Because if I'm in my office, there's going to be people there.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it's just,
Right.
there's no,
Right.
there was no way to have that quiet moment in the middle of that. So it
Right.
was finding kind of my own little secret getaway spot that just gave me that pause whenever I needed that minute. And so it's finding ways that you can just insert, even just for a couple of minutes. It doesn't have to be for an hour. It doesn't have to be a long time. It can just be those few minutes outside, or find that place where you can just take a deep breath and just pray for a minute and just sort of recenter your mind before you kind of jump back in. And so that's important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one resource, if I can talk, that I think has been good for me and that I've been enjoying is, and he doesn't pay me to say this, Carey Nieuwhof. He's got a great podcast, the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast. He also has a new book called At Your Best. And it was born out of, so Carey Nieuwhof, a little bit about him. He is essentially kind of like a leadership guru now, but he was a minister in Canada for like 20 years or something, pastored a church there. And the book At Your Best was sort of born out of his personal experience with burnout and wanting to help other people be strategic in how they use their time, and not just time management, but like building a life and building your priorities in such a way that, as he says it, you have a life that you don't feel like you constantly need a vacation from.
Right.
And so I think he's got lots of great podcast episodes. He's got that book. He's just got lots of really good resources for that. So again, he doesn't pay me to say that, but that has been just some resources that I have found that have been helpful for me in reframing the way I think about like how I use my time, how I schedule my day, and how I prioritize different things throughout the day.
Yes.
So,
well, and I think that goes very well into our other heading for our topics, and that's looking at your organization, looking at leadership. And it's just vitally important that you find those types of resources, whatever type of leadership advice that you seem to speak to well, to find that person that encourages you when you read their material, when you listen to their podcasts, so that you can think through strategically how you want to lead your ministry and how are you going to organize your life to be able to be this leader that you have been called to be. Because I promise you, we've talked a lot about this as we've been talking about how demanding ministry can be and how it's constant. It's never ending. You always have the next event to plan for. You always have the next emergency that comes up. You always have the next event that you have to find leaders for. There's this, it's a non-ending type of situation.
Right.
And so you're never going to find yourself with ample time to be able to prepare. It's never going to happen.
You have to carve it
and
out.
So you have to schedule it. And I've talked to so many children's ministers that will say, but I don't have time to do that. And it goes back to, it is just a requirement that you make time to do this. If you don't, you're going to constantly be running behind, and it's going to constantly be the stress on you that you can't overtake, because it's impossible to catch up. You're never going to catch up.
Right.
I'm sorry. I hate to tell you that, but you're never going to catch up. And so what you really need to do is to do a couple of things for your own personal health, for your own personal, just to be able to handle the stress. And that is to take some time, at some time, choose whenever the beginning of the year is for you. Whether the beginning of the year for you is a January, kind of a start to the year, if the new year begins for you for September, when school starts and when you do promotion, or if it's the end of the school year, if it's in May, when, however you want to look at your calendar, you pick what is the most comfortable for you to be your beginning of your year and the close of your year. And before the beginning of your year, calendar a couple of days that all you're going to be doing is planning. And that means that you will probably need to get away from the office. It may mean that you may need to get away from home for a couple of days. That's one thing that my husband and I always did, that I always was very appreciative to him for, is that I would literally get a hotel in town. I wouldn't, because I didn't want to spend a whole lot of money to plan a major trip.
Yeah.
But I knew that I wouldn't get work done at home like this. I knew I wouldn't get work done at the church like this. And so I would take a couple of days off, and then I would just go to a local hotel, and I would just spend the time in prayer and planning for the upcoming year. Just that little moment to be able just to get away. But the main thing that I did was I looked through my year. I planned out my calendar. I planned out when was going to be the best day for my day off. I planned out, what conferences I wanted to go to that year. I planned out, kind of what my schedule was going to be for the day. How was I going to fit things in? And it made a huge difference for me, because it gave me that opportunity to really sit and look at the coming year, and to just sort of get my brain focused on what I needed to make sure got done. It gave me a chance to look at vision a little bit more for the ministry. What did I want to accomplish in ministry this year? What were the areas that I wanted to do? And I could always do that during a conference. The thing about conferences is that you're going all day long, and you're getting so much information.
It's like drinking from a fire hose. Yeah.
It really is. And it's huge. But I would always try to kind of, like I said, I would make those notes for conferences, and then I would take them with me for these days that I would take off to go through to make my decisions then. Okay, this was a really good point. Oh, I'm not really focusing on this area well enough. Oh, I need to, and it would be kind of where I would recenter myself. And so it's really, really important for you to be able to have that time, just to be able to plan and to be able to think through your year. And it really is going to be worth it in the end, because I know there's a lot of people that say, oh, it's so crazy when I come back after taking a couple of days off. And it is. Because, your kids, and you've got, things that
this, that, and the other, obviously, all the stuff.
All the stuff.
Yeah.
But for me, it was always very helpful. And it really meant a lot for me to be able to take that time. And so I found it really helpful.
Yeah. I've been very fortunate to be on church staffs where we do that as a staff. We would take a couple days of planning. And so it just sort of would depend on the circumstances. But for example, we would stay locally, and we would just go and rent the conference room, not even rent, but would check out the conference room at our local associational office and go there. Just like what you're saying, get away from the church office, get away from the demands, kind of set our phones aside, and as a group do exactly what you're talking about, that strategic planning and looking at the calendar and, calendaring events a year out. And we would do that twice a year. And so I've been very fortunate to be a part of a church staff that did that as a group. But even so, I mean, that doesn't preclude doing that personally, especially in advance of those group times. That way you come into that staff calendaring and that staff planning with clear vision and goals and ideas and direction, in your mind as well. So yeah.
It's always useful. It's always worth it in the end to have that time to figure out how you're going to block out that time and figure out how you're going to do it. I think that you mentioned something when you were talking to the importance of having ministry relationships outside of your church.
Yes.
The importance of finding other children's ministers that you can meet with on a regular basis, even if it's just lunch once a month or once a quarter, finding ways that you can connect with other children's ministers so that they can, give you advice, so that they can sort of listen to your struggles, that you can listen to theirs, and that gives you that opportunity to just have another point of view to look at. Have you found that useful?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think it's very important for these sort of close ministry friends who you're bouncing ideas off of whenever you're getting discouraged, whenever you're struggling. These are the people you talk to. I think it's very important for them to be people outside of your church. I think, one, it's always good to get an outsider's perspective. If you say, hey, this is what's going on, these are the dynamics, how would you handle this? What do you think? And then two, I think we would never, ever want to give a perception that there are certain people within our church who are like in the know with us or in a clique with us, or like they know all the scuttlebutt because they're our friend or whatever. And so I think we have to be, obviously want to be friendly and kind and welcoming to everyone, but I do think we have to be very cautious with whom we sort of share those ministry related struggles. And I think getting perspectives from other children's ministers and other people in the ministry is super valuable. I mean, Valerie, you have been one of those people for me over the years. Like I said, we met 10 years ago at seminary. But even so, I mean, you don't have to go to seminary to find these people. Another great example is I went to a conference, heard a wonderful speaker on safety and security, Faye, and so who Valerie also knows. And so I went up to her after the conference and said, hey, I would love for you to come speak at my church. And then she did. And so kind of from there blossomed this relationship with her as well. And so I think part of it, especially for me as an introvert, talking to other people who maybe are introverted and who, we're not the kind of people who have never met a stranger. We have met a stranger. But just being open and willing to just going up and having those conversations, to talking to someone when you're at a conference or, when you're at an event with other children's ministers or people in the ministry, just being like, I'm just going to go strike up some conversations and just see if there's someone who I click with and someone with whom I can develop these relationships.
And I think that's what's so important. Really, it really is, because you have to be able, there are things that you can never discuss with church members. There are things you can't really discuss with your own staff. There are, we all have moments where we need just to be able to have these conversations of, this is happening and I don't know what to do about it, and know that you can trust that person to be confidential about the situation, and for it not to become church gossip, or for it not to become a problem with church members who do have a difficulty with that line. And so I think it's really important that you have that outlet outside of your church. And like I said, it doesn't have to be another children's minister. It can just be another close friend that that you trust and you appreciate their advice. And but it is nice to have both, to have that person that you trust, that you can get some advice from, that you can vent to without it being a problem. That person that just lets you say say, I know, just say whatever you want to say and get it out.
Right.
Because we have those moments where we can't keep holding
Right.
it all inside. We can't keep
Right.
trying to handle it all ourselves. We were created for relationship. We were
Yes.
created to have relationships
Yes.
with one another and to lift one another up and support one another. And so
Right.
finding people who can do that in your life is vitally important. And I can promise you, if you're looking for a children's minister to have that kind of relationship with, that children's minister is probably looking for somebody to have that relationship with
Yes.
too,
Yes.
because we
Yes.
really do. We want that input. We want it to get new ideas, and we want your opinion, and we want that. So taking the time to try to find ways you can build relationships. And we've talked before about how I was always really blessed when I was in a large city that we had a meeting of children's ministers in the city where we would get together for lunch once a quarter and just talk about different things that we were dealing with and get input and advice. And so I built a lot of relationships through those meetings. And so that could be, a really great thing to think about, even if it's outside of your denomination, even if that church has a children's minister, but they're not the same denomination you're in. Children's ministry, the problems are all the same all the way across the board. And all the
Yes.
challenges
Yes.
are the same. And so
Yes.
it's just really good to find those people in your community where you can build those relationships with. I think you made a really great point when you talked about how you went to another church for a conference and you met Faye and you heard her
Yeah.
speak. And so I think making sure that you're going to conferences whenever you
Yes.
can to set up those
Absolutely.
times where you can go get training, where you can go to learn and to grow, but also to be able to visit other churches, to be able to see their children's ministry. Usually a children's minister is very happy to let you come and just tour through the building and to see,
Just look around.
what they, how they have things set up so you can ask questions and you can get information. And that's always incredibly helpful. But you also can find things like you just said, you found Faye and then you brought her into your church to do
Yes.
training. And so finding the opportunity to do conferences, I usually did 2 conferences a year. I tried to do one that was the publishing house of the material we were using at the church so that I felt like I got that training on the material that we were using. And then I also would personally try to go to just another children's conference somewhere that year that was maybe a different publishing house or a different organization so that I could just sort of glean other information, different viewpoints, different material, different people, just to kind of have that broader view. So I would have one that the church would cover for me to attend, and then one that we budgeted for me to be able to attend on my own. And so I always found that really helpful. Do you have conferences that you attend each year?
It's kind of varied over the years, but yes, definitely children's ministry conferences. We have our state association is really great to have routine conferences. I know we talked recently that I guess it was three weeks ago now, went to like a safety and security training with our state association, which was really great. And it's easy for me to feel like, oh man, like I've heard all this stuff, but you know what? I'm so glad I went because my state had updated the mandatory reporting statutes and I didn't know. And so I got some information on updated mandatory reporting statutes. So even with, conferences where it's like, you feel like, oh man, I've been to a lot of conferences, but man, you never know what you're going to learn. You never know.
I always walk away with something.
Yes.
Always.
Yes.
And
one thing that I did for the first time last year, and this is like, maybe I'm probably the weird one for like doing this for the first time just last year. But I went to a women's ministry conference. Actually ended up going to 2.
Yes.
It was the first time that I'd been to women's ministry conferences, one at Southeastern, our old alumni school, and then another one. And so I was like, ooh, this is really nice. I'm really enjoying this. And so I don't know why, like I'd done tons of children's ministry conferences, but it just never crossed my mind to go to a women's conference. And so I've got one of those on the schedule for next year as well, because
good.
It's one of those things where it's not so much like career development, but it is still personal development. Basically, like what we were talking about at the start of this episode.
I was going to say, it's just what we were saying before,
kind
that
of
personal spiritual
looping
relationship.
back around, back into our own personal walk with Christ to where it was just like, oh, this is really nice.
Oh yeah. They're always, and finding
Yes.
the Bible teacher that you enjoy, finding their conference, because
Mhm.
most of them have them at some point, finding a women's conference, finding those things, because I have found over the years that I've always thought was very interesting. There, if you find a church event, like for example, a lot of times our own denominational events, they don't have special breakout sessions for children's ministry.
Mhm.
And part of the
Mhm.
reason is because children's ministers can't get away from the church as
To
easily as
go
other
to
ministers
them.
can.
Mhm.
And so I think we have to be a little more proactive to find those
Mhm.
moments of being
Mhm.
able to find those continuing education opportunities, but also just those ministry events that you
Mhm.
can be a part of and that will be beneficial to you.
Yes.
And so I think women's ministry, Bible study conferences, all
Mhm.
those types of things can be incredibly helpful. And again, it's something
Yes.
you can kind of look through your year and your budget and decide, well,
Mhm.
this year, and do something every other year. Maybe if you can only
Right,
go to one
right.
conference a year, do the children's ministry conference one
Mhm.
year and then do the women's ministry conference the next year. So it gives you
Mhm.
those, those little breaks in
Different
your
options.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
I think that that's huge. I think one other thing that I had was for you to remember that you have been called as the children's minister of your church. You have been given a calling that for whatever reason, even if you don't feel like you belong there, even if you wonder how in the world you got
Mhm.
there, even if you have not had the training or you didn't have the experience beforehand, you were the person that the church asked because this is where God has you for this season. God
Mhm.
has you in your ministry for a season and for
Mhm.
a reason. And so you have been called, whether you feel like you have been or not, you have been called for this time to be a leader in your church's ministry. And
Mhm.
so I want you to be able to have the confidence that
Mhm.
you have been called. And so have that confidence in your vision for your ministry. Have that confidence in the decisions that you're making. Be willing to listen to criticism, but also remember that you have been called to make the decisions. And so you have confidence in what you know that God
Mhm.
has called you to do.
Amen.
And don't allow others to make you feel like you have to compromise on things.
Mhm.
I will tell you that as you are dealing with things, you want to choose the hills you're willing to die on.
Amen.
That's a for sure thing.
Amen.
Um, you want to very carefully choose those hills that you're willing to die on, but it's okay for you to make those decisions, to
Mhm.
place those boundaries in your life and to walk with confidence and to not let people, because everyone has an opinion.
Mhm.
Everyone thinks that they know what should be done. Everyone thinks that they know how children's ministry should be run and what they think is safe and what they think is not safe, and what everybody has their own opinion for a lot of these things. And so I want you to have confidence in what God has called you to do, to just prayerfully make these decisions, but then stand firm in what you know to be right and what you know to be the best thing for your ministry as a whole, even though it
Mhm.
might not be the best thing for each
For that
individual person.
person, they feel like, yeah.
Yes, they may feel like that they have to have
Mhm.
this particular room. This is my
Mhm.
Sunday school room, and I
Mhm.
have to teach first graders in this classroom. But
Yeah.
if you know that rearranging your classroom for safety or security or for
Yeah.
organizational reasons are best,
Yeah.
then you stand strong in what you know is best for the ministry, and you find a loving way to help explain that to people. But
Right.
don't let that start to wear you down, because that the criticism and just all of those kinds of things that happen in ministry can be very exhausting, and it can
Mhm.
wear you down very quickly. And so I
Amen.
just want you to move forward in confidence with the calling that God has given you, and to set your boundaries and to stand firm on them. And I think that is going to help you fight burnout in a great way if you can move in with confidence in the calling that God has given you.
Amen. And I'm actually going to use that as sort of a jumping off point for another sort of offshoot thought
Mhm.
with, as the leader of a ministry. And so this is me in some ways talking about my own personal leadership philosophy.
Mhm.
Yes, I am responsible for every aspect of the ministry, but I don't have to execute every aspect of the ministry. And it is my calling to equip the saints. And so one of my things as a leader is I am a strong believer in leadership development and in delegation. And so as you are going through leading your ministry, intentionally looking out for those great leaders who you can cultivate, who you can teach, who you can cross-train, because the more that you can spread that load of your administrative duties, your oversight, the more that you can spread that load in trusted, trained, great leaders, the more margin you have in your life and in your leadership to be able to bounce back from the criticism or the hard conversations or all the other things. And so the more that you can equip the saints, the more that you can train leaders, delegate to them, get them equipped, cross-train, the more margin you create in your life, in your schedule, in your own heart and mind, as you have others who are coming alongside you and sharing the work of the ministry with you. And so I think that is incredibly important. And we do have another episode on recruiting volunteers, and we talk a little bit about this as well, cultivating leaders and recruiting them.
And I think one of the things that we made the point of there too when we were talking, and I feel like we should just mention it here too, just in case you didn't hear the other, is just to remind you that children's ministry leadership is very much an administrative focus.
Yes.
A lot of people think, oh, it's because
you play
I
with
enjoy
kids
being
all
with the
day.
kids and I get to be with the kids and I get to teach kids, and be with the kids. And you do get to be with the children more often, for sure. But as a children's ministry leader, the majority of your job is administrative. It's helping grow leaders to be those people that are working with your kids and that are doing things. I think it was interesting. I've been watching a lot of influencers as they've been sending their kids off to college over the last couple of weeks. And you see sort of some different philosophies in parenting going on when you're watching and listening to what they're talking about and what they're focusing on. And the idea is this: we are raising our children to be strong, independent, and to be able to go out in the world and do well and to know what they believe. And so when we're watching them head off to college, they are actually doing what we have been preparing them for 18 years to do. But there are so many parents that go, but I don't want them. I want them to want to be with me. I want them to not want to go. I want them to not be excited about having their own space. And it's like, but that's what we've been working towards for all of these years, is to set them off. So we want them to be excited to do that. That was our purpose. And it's sort of the same with children's ministry. It's really easy to think, well, I have to be the one teaching. I have to be the one, running this event. I have to be the one doing all of this work. And really what you're doing, or your responsibility, is to help train leaders to be able to step out and do those things and do them well and be able to do them as their service to their church and to their families. And so it's reminding ourselves that we don't always have to be busy. Busy is not a sign of successful. We always think that if we're not doing everything, then we're not doing well. You can be a wonderful children's minister and delegate really well. That's the point. You want to bring people in to do ministry with you. And so I think that that's something we kind of forget. And so it's something for us to remember, is that we can't do it all ourselves. It's not possible. It's not going to exhaust you.
And sometimes whenever we're doing all the things, we're robbing someone else of their opportunity to grow in their relationship with Christ through serving in a particular way. And so sometimes we just kind of got to get out of our own way and give other people an opportunity to serve. We want to train them well, we want to prepare them well, but give them that opportunity to serve and to grow in their relationship with Christ through service. So,
because if you're willing to do something, people are more than willing to let you do it. If you were saying to yourself, well, I have to do it because no one has stepped up to do it. Well, it might be that no one stepped up to do it because
you're always doing it
yourself. So you have to kind of think through, have I really tried to find the right person to do this particular thing in our ministry? And so it's really important that you do that. So
Amen.
all right. Other thoughts?
I don't think so. I feel like we've been around the world, but I do feel like, I feel like we've thrown out the sort of myriad of ways to approach burnout, and I think it's good, and I think and I hope that our listeners can listen to that and take a thing or two and be like, oh, yeah, that.
Right.
And so hopefully people
And
can
not let
listen
all
to
this to overwhelm you, because you can't do it
right,
all at once. Like
right,
I've said many
right.
times during this, is that I have
Yes.
struggled with every single one of these
Oh
areas.
yes. Oh
And I've
yes.
struggled with them more at certain times than others. I've been better at certain times than others. It's an ongoing process. It's an ever-growing, ever-changing, living, breathing aspect of our lives, is to figure out how we're balancing our service and our relationship with God and our
Our
family
family
and
and our
all of those
time
things,
and
right?
right.
And so it's a delicate balance. So hopefully we've given you a few ideas of some things that you can kind of think about or that you can focus on. And as always, if you have questions, don't hesitate to mention them in the comments. Send us a message, let us know, so that we can try to make sure we cover topics if there's something we've left unsaid or something we've kind of mentioned and then you're like, I don't know what she meant by that. Let us know, because we would love to be able to elaborate a little bit more, try to help you. That is our purpose. Our heart is that we can minister to you, the children's
Amen.
minister. That was what we really wanted to be able to accomplish with this. And so hopefully that has happened this week in our conversation. We would love it if you would hit subscribe on our YouTube channel.
Yes.
We are working so hard to try to get 100 followers so that we can make the channel a little bit more accessible and so that we can do a little bit more with it. And know that we are on Pinterest. If you are following us there, we appreciate it. And we are working on all the other things. We are going to be letting you know as we go through, but we are trying to get some more things going, and we are working hard on it. It has definitely been a big learning curve for me.
Yeah, we are not technical gurus.
We are not technical.
No.
We do not know what we're doing. We are children's ministers that just wanted to be able to share and help you. And so we're going to try to find as many possible ways as we can to do that, but just be patient with us as we work on it. But we appreciate just your encouragement and you watching and you being a part of our conversation. And we look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.